forgot I don't have the webcam on. Wait, did I have it on the first stream? Alright. Let's see. No, I did not. Oh, right, because I only have the webcam on for... I forgot I subscribed to a channel called Red. No reason. Yeah, totally not something to do with the story or anything. Anyway, hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the narration remake of... God damn it. Hold on. Alright, carry on. Welcome to part 3 of my revised narration of the NES Godzilla Creepypasta. And, let me just say that... I gotta say, this story is just... I know I've already said this numerous times, but this story is just amazing. When we last left off, we had just ended Entropy. And now we're on to chapter 6 of the story, Extus, the penultimate world. Now, just a reminder, I am going to be, narrating the story as if I was Zack himself. I'm not actually Zack, I'm not Cosby Daff. So, I think with that being said, let's cut the chit-chat and get to the story, shall we? In the brief instant before the transition between Entropy and Extus, I had hoped I would get Godzilla and Anguirus back. As the story appeared, no, not the story, the board appeared, I saw that my wish was half granted. I had Godzilla back, but I didn't get back Anguirus. I would have preferred both, but despite Anguirus' innate abilities, I would have chosen Godzilla if I had to pick between the two. Wait. I can make it. I'm trying to get to Franklin's house. Wow. So I'm gonna take a brief break. I'm in the part after that. If you guys were wondering what that loud thud was from earlier, is because there was a crane flying here and it just landed on my desk. It's been like annoying me for the past while, so I just killed it. Also, by the way, I'm reading this story on the Creepypasta wiki, but one of the recent wiki activities was the creepy person. What kind of a story name is that? Also, why are there jet skis when this lake is literally like yay big? What the heck? Alright, yeah. Just like entrance over here. Yes, Franklin, dive. Dive and die! It's like all of a sudden red... I mean the red monster, yeah. I was talking about the color red, not some monster. No. No, wait, no, the red monster was Rodan. I didn't know that would... God damn it. I didn't know that would... God damn it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Alright. Alright. What the heck? Wow. People really don't know how to drive. Alright. So, sorry for deviating from the topic. I'm just trying to get to Franklin's house before sundown. I mean, actual sundown. It's still sunset. Because I set it to be like that, so that way in case I had to get to Franklin's house on foot, I could get there on foot. But in the story we're about to... Ah! I know I wasn't going to get hit anyway, but I just did that because. Alright, so Franklin's house is just over here. Right over here. I recognize that house. Dude, I would love to live in this house. But I'm pretty sure Zach in the story didn't actually live in a house like this. Also, I'm playing as Franklin this time just because he's one of my favorite characters from the game. Alright, so we're gonna go to the living room. Sadly, we can't sit, but we can at least just stand here. Alright, and back to the story. Exodus had two different colored temples, white and pink, a pyramid, what looked like some modern buildings, and two other icons I couldn't really figure out at the time. The two new bosses were... Oh wait, no, not two. Alright. The new bosses were Kumonga, Gorosaurus, and not Ghidorah. With Godzilla back, I was excited and eager to explore, yet still cautious. I went to the quiz level first, just as before. This time, Face's questions were more random than ever. Quiz number 4. Do elephants breathe? Answer, yes. Reaction, no. Weird face number 2. Question number 2. Have you ever been molested by a family member? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 6. Alright. 3. Have you ever raped anyone? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 8. I like how it's 268 instead of 2468. Anyway. Question number 4. Is green your favorite color? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 10. Number 5. Is the computer the pinnacle of modern technology? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 4. 6. Are you a tough guy? Answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 12. 7. Can you fly? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 9. 8. Can you stand on your head? Reaction, answer, yes. Reaction, weird face number 7. 9. Do you hate raccoons? Answer, no. Reaction, confused. 10. Do you feel blame? Answer, no. Reaction, weird face number 11. Speaking of 11, question 11. Would you like a new monster? Answer, yes. Reaction, surprised. Question number 12. Will you miss me? Huh. Will you miss me? What does he mean? I don't care much about him, but... was happy that I was getting a new monster, but that last question really got to me. Will you miss me? Is Face referring to when I finished the game? I thought. Since the revelation of the game's truly unworldly, or other. Since the revelation of the game's truly otherworldly nature, I wasn't sure what to think of Face or anything else in the game. But something about that last statement gave me a genuine feeling of sadness from Face. As I was thinking about this, the game had gone back to the board. I got a new monster, but I didn't have any clue of who it was. The sprite had a slight resemblance to Rodan, but the head was totally off. I moved this mysterious newcomer to a white temple icon and started the level. When I started the level, the screen appeared with the text, "Find the gem," presumably instructions for beating the level. After that, I got my first look at the new playable monster, a hairy dark blue creature with bat wings and a skull-like face named Solomon. And I also found that my path was blocked by a beam of light and a small pillar with a plate on it. I figured that this beam of light was blocking the exit, so I had to find the gem and place it on the plate to deactivate the beam. How exactly I was going to do that, I didn't know. There wasn't anything in the original game requiring you to find an item to beat a level. I'd have to find out when I obtained the gem. The only direction I had to go was left, so on I proceeded. Solomon was a interesting monster, to say the least. He's capable of both flight and a heat beam, both of which proved to be very useful. He could also kick and slash with his wings, but he couldn't duck. The White Temple's music was a vocalizing choir, or a video game approximation of such. It's hard to describe, but it had a very holy sound to it. It wasn't long before I started running into waves of strange new enemies. They did little to stop me. I ran past them while slashing and didn't take any damage. There was a pause between each wave of enemies. After you killed about 10, there wouldn't be any for about a minute. Then the next wave would appear. After 5 minutes, I noticed holes in the floor and the ceiling. Guillotine-mouthed monsters were rapidly flying up and down these crevices. So I had to time my jumps carefully because I didn't know if I'd get another shot at this. Luckily, I managed to get through without a scratch. I'm just lucky, I guess. After that, I found myself at the end of the hallway, facing some kind of mini-boss monster. It moved fast and had some kind of projectile that it shot in 4 directions, but I killed it quite easily using Solomon's heat beam. When the battle was over, I had my gem, which was placed inside the creature's head. I found that I could pick up and hold the gem by walking over to it and holding down B. I made the long trek back to the start, depositing the gem onto the plate, which deactivated the beam. I left the stage and was shown what was probably the strangest quirk related to the Solomon monster. Oh, cool. An image of Solomon close up with still the best, 1973. But I don't know anything about Solomon being in any Godzilla media. Huh. By the way, that was just me being Zach. You know, I said that I was going to be sort of role-playing as him, so some stuff that I'll say, like, it'll be related to the story, and I'm saying it as if I was Zachary, but it's not actually in the story. Every time you complete a level or defeat a boss with Solomon, this screen appears. I have no idea what Still the Best 1973 is. Neither the date nor the phrase have any meaning or significance to me that I can think of. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. The next level I played was one that I'd call Bronze Pyramids. I used Godzilla and found that he had leveled up to 12. He'd been leveled up to 12 since I last played him on Dementia. Bronze Pyramids were fairly normal as far as these levels go, but the visuals were quite interesting, almost unusually colorful and lively. The music had a fitting Egyptian style to it. It was slow and mysterious sounding. I strolled through the level fighting off the various enemies. None were too difficult, although the ants could be a pain if you ran into too many of them. My favorite enemy was this giant reptile I encountered halfway through. At the end of the level, I came to a giant pyramid and engaged in yet another mini-boss fight. Though, this one was a bit different because I had to fight two of these monsters at the same time. Individually, I could have dealt with them easily, but fighting both of them at once was challenging. But I sped things up by triggering one of the twin beasts into barbecuing his brother by jumping when he used his flame breath. After defeating the twin monsters, I noticed something strange after returning to the board. I was now able to move my monster piece anywhere on the board without limits. Normally Godzilla could only move 3 spaces each turn, and Mothra could only move 5. I wanted to try out Solomon some more, so I moved his piece to one of the brown pillar-looking icons with colored dots and started the level. When I got to the level, I then realized what the level icon represented. Totem poles. I was greeted by 2 of them right at the beginning. The music had a Native American sound to it. It seemed to be using the same instruments as the Entropy Forest, but was noticeably different, but just as foreboding. I walked around for 3 minutes with nothing else in sight besides the totem poles. I didn't realize until then, but I wasn't expecting another level with nothing alive in it after all the activity in Entropy. Walking by all these multicolored faces, this unnerving level left me feeling like I was being watched. Only about 10 minutes after I started Exodus, I was already halfway through. After getting from the totem pole level, I tried one of the TV screens to see how strange it was this time. Even more strange than before. The music for this was the Uranus theme. By the way, the image, or rather animated GIF, I don't know. It's basically someone in a bikini, but they've got like an eagle head looking left and right. Anyway, going back to the story, I switched back to Godzilla to play another level. And this level was quite a surprise because it was a normal city level. The colors were gloomy, but even still, this was quite a shock. This was the kind of level I was expecting to see in a Godzilla game, but I was kind of mad that I didn't get to play it earlier. The music was the Earth theme. I found it strange that a level fitting a Godzilla game would show up this late, but there's no point crying over spilt milk, I suppose. I moved Solomon over to a grayish-green icon, which turned out to be a giant high-tech laboratory of some sort. Sorry about that. Lots of mechanical drones in this level, but Solomon cleared through each of them just like the White Temple enemies. The music was a gritty industrial beat. There was also a strange flying cyborg enemy, which was annoying because it could fly away when you jumped to attack it. Also of interest were these large stasis tanks holding some kind of monster inside. As you would guess, sometimes the monsters awaken and break through the glass. I tried to get past the stasis tanks as fast as possible because the monsters inside proved to be vicious little bastards upon release. At the end of the level was an elevator which I used to go down to the bottom of the level where the exit was. Along the way I was shot at by security drones. I couldn't leave the elevator, so my only defense was the heat beam. The last level type was this simple thing I call the Heart Temple, for obvious reasons. Nothing but a big hallway filled with floating enemies shaped like human hearts. They're incapable of causing you damage, so what you do is run through the level smashing as many as you can to get all the power-ups. One run through these levels will get the life meter back up to full, and I would greatly appreciate these levels later. The Heart Temple's music reminded me of a circus tune, and an overly cheerful sound to it, which gave the level a really weird feeling. Having seen all the levels, I chose to fight Gorosaurus using Solomon. The music for this fight was Godzilla's theme. It was during this fight that I realized that Solomon is overpowered. A single well-aimed slash can take down as many as 4 of the enemy's life bars. Due to this, the fight was over very quickly. Gorosaurus had no projectile attacks or anything else that could match Solomon's deadly claws, but I kept the fight going just long enough to see if Gorosaurus would use his iconic kangaroo kick, and I was greatly pleased when he did. Even though I knew Solomon was my fighting ace, I used Godzilla to fight Kumonga, just for variety. I briefly considered using Mothra, but of course Godzilla won out. Kumonga was also a simple opponent, no heat beams or anything. He attacks by jumping on you, stabbing you with his mandibles, and he also uses his signature webbing stream to paralyze you. Once you get webbed, Kumonga will sometimes take the opportunity to attack, but it's mostly a way to buy some time, like Godzilla backing you into a corner until the time runs out. His music was Hidora's theme. With Gorosaurus and Kumonga defeated, I was at the end of Exodus. Before I fought Ghidorah, there was something I had to do. I wasn't expecting much from it, but for documentation's sake, I took a look at the other TV screen. This is what it was. It's literally just someone in a business suit, but their head is a faucet, and it turns on and on, turning the water on and off. Funny. I don't think there ever was much reason behind the TV screens. If I had to guess, I'd say it's some random, uncontrollable manifestation of the cartridge's abilities. Or maybe all this makes perfect sense to the game. Who knows? Anyway, Mr. Fawcett's theme was the Saturn theme. It was time for the opponent I've been dreading, not Ghidorah. Although I gained courage with Solomon's combat advantages, I was still nervous, and when I started the fight, I was immediately confused. My opponent was not Ghidorah? I defeated the Imposter with a few strikes, and then not Mothra appeared. Then it made sense. In order to get to not Ghidorah, I had to fight all the previous replacements first. And battle them I did. Basically, the images I'm looking at are just Solomon fighting all the previous not bosses. Now, for those wondering, not boss means that, like, if it's, for example, not Gigan or not Hedora or something like that, it's the replacement for the original boss. Anyway, I tore my way through them until I made it to not Gizora, who was a Dorat. Once I'd stopped laughing, I defeated him with only 2 slashes. The music stopped, and I thought I was going back to the board. But the battle wasn't over yet. The real fight was against the Chimera, a monstrous hybrid of all the replacement beasts. This was by far the most difficult boss yet. Every attack of his would cut down a whole life bar per use, while attacks against him were greatly weakened. Solomon's slash, for example, was now lucky to take away 1/2 a life bar. During this battle, I gained a great appreciation for 2 things. 1, the boss fight time limit, and the Heart Temple. Had it not been for those things, I might never have beaten this boss. To take down this behemoth, I came up with a strategy. I would switch between Godzilla and Solomon. As one began to get seriously low, I would take them through the Heart Temple, while fighting Chimera with another. I should count my blessings that Chimera didn't regain lost health. A very interesting thing about the Chimera was the colored sections of his body corresponded to his different body parts. So each body part effectively had its own life meter. The head was invulnerable as long as the other parts were present, and would always be the last part to be destroyed. In addition to being difficult, it was also the longest fight ever. I tried to remember how many times I got taken out of the fight by the timer, but I lost count around 13. Eventually I had destroyed all the components but the head, which now flew around on its own incredibly fast speed. Chimera fought well, but I was extremely determined, and once he was reduced to a head, he no longer had the power to defeat Solomon, and I heat beamed him into oblivion. And the Chimera was no more. I was exhausted after that drawn-out fight, and I was worried that might affect my performance in the in-world chase level. The headquarters icon was replaced, but not by the Hellbeast face. Instead, it was a crucifix. I was completely stunned. I wasn't excited about seeing the Hellbeast icon again, but if there was only one good thing about these levels, it's that they were very predictable. I had a basic idea of what to expect, but now I was at the end, and the icon was completely different. What did it mean, and why a crucifix? It made me feel very uneasy. I attempted to start the level with Solomon, but couldn't. I got this notice that simply stated, "Solomon can't enter here." It didn't say why, but I think it might have something to do with Solomon's demonic appearance. Since Solomon was out of the question, I went with Godzilla instead. Once I saw the level, the crucifix made sense. The level was a graveyard. I was still on edge, thinking this was some kind of trick. The last level had always involved running from the demonic beast, and I wasn't going to be fooled into thinking this would be any different. So I started out running, but after a minute with that interruption, I slowed down. It was during this time that the music caught my attention. I knew it sounded familiar when I first heard it, but it took a while before I realized what it was. An 8-bit rendition of Prayer for Peace from the first Godzilla movie. Very sad, powerful song, even in this form. At 2 minutes into this level, I encountered something I wasn't sure how to react to. My first instinct was to run. This blue statuesque being simply floating in place. Simply floated in place. I felt compelled to just stare at it for a time. Since this was a grave, it was floating over a chapel, I guess that this was some kind of angel watching over the deceased. It gave me a strange but warm feeling. I wouldn't say happy, but I felt that I was at peace somehow. I had never seen this being before, yet it seemed very familiar to me. As I was about to leave, the Hell Beast appeared, and its presence warped the music into a terrifying discordant screech and transformed the level, desecrating the tombstones as a new background appeared, comprised of... new ground. The background is just basically the same as every other chase level. Comprised of blood-soaked bodies. I could feel my heart now beating out of control. I had no chance of escape with the monster I chose. It lunged for the kill, but the angel got in its way. The demon roared and started clawing through the angel's legs, and tears of blood streamed from its eyes. I wanted to save the angel, but there was nothing I could do. I had to honor its sacrifice and run. And so I ran through the hellish landscape as fast as I could. The monster soon caught up with me, still swallowing the body of the angel, whose legs it had torn off. This sight made my terror turn into rage. I now found myself hating this horrible monster. There was no doubt in my mind that it was pure evil, and I wanted it to die. When I got to the level, I remembered how it responded to my insult and trance. I spoke to it and said, "You're going to pay." This was its response. Its eyes glowed, looked at me, and roared. Oh, dear God. What? I had no idea how I'd follow up on that threat, and nothing could have prepared me for the horrors of the final world, Zenith. Zenith? What the hell? It looked up at me and roared. What? What's Zenith? This has to be the end, right? Zenith? According to the dictionary, zenith means the point at which something or someone is at their most powerful, the apex of their power? Is this the end? And here we are, the final world. I don't like to discuss this part, and it still bothers me very much. But it's something I have to do, so I can put this behind me. People deserve to know. At this point, I was well aware of the game's unnatural nature, but Zenith was different than the other worlds. While the others were certainly strange and sometimes frightening, the world of Zenith was like a nightmare. I didn't have to go any further than the board screen for an indication that something was seriously wrong with Zenith. The first thing I noticed was the blood red texture of the board, and the music, which was an eerie whistling tune. Oh, by the way, the eerie whistling tune, so, like I said, the person that technically first introduced me to this creepypasta, not directly, they didn't talk to me about it, but it was a video that they had uploaded with the permission of another YouTuber who made, parts for this, but the person in question that made this into a full, I think it's like an hour-long video or something, the song that was playing for the Zenith board, board was, actually Opening to Hell from, Doom 2, Hell on Earth. And, I mean, that theme fits, but there's actually another person who, has made music for, the NES Godzilla Creepypasta by the name of, Vector Man Overkill, and they made a orchestrated version of Zenith, which kind of sounds like something that you would hear out of Metroid, like Metroid Prime, but I think that song fits this map better than the original whistling tune, because even though you hear a choir in the song going like, oh, in a haunting melody, I think that makes it sound more menacing than a whistling tune that sounds eerie. Anywho, going back to the story, I noticed that I had Solomon and Anguirus back, and I felt better for a second. And then I scrolled over to see what my enemies were this time. This time it was Destroya and Ghidorah, but judging from the icon, it was a different Ghidorah than the original, standing on the ground instead of flying. The grotesquely detailed pinkish red icon also caught my eye. I couldn't tell what it was supposed to be, but I was afraid to find out. Going back to my side of the board, I decided that there wasn't much choice but to do my usual routine and going to the quiz level before anything else. I wasn't prepared for what happened. What the face? He's dead? Is this what he meant by, will you miss me? Oh, God. Get out? It still has yes or no? Starting to glitch out. I jumped back when this appeared, accompanied by a terribly distorted version of the password theme. It looked as if Face had fallen victim to some terrible glitch. Is this what he meant by, will you miss me? Did he know this would happen? My thoughts were stopped short as I noticed that the screen was glitching and seemingly falling apart while I was inactive, so I quickly rushed out. When I got back to the board, I somehow gained a new monster. I wasn't even asked if I wanted it, so I tried to select it, and this happened. What the hell is going on? The game's behavior was scaring me. I hadn't even started playing the levels yet. I couldn't understand why I was randomly given a new character and then denied access to it. But for the time being, there was little that could be done, and I viewed the very last TV screen. Oh, God. No music, no animation. Dead. Every instinct I had was telling me to stop playing and to just turn the game off. And something in the game itself might have been trying to warn me as to just how horrible this last world was. But then, every stretch of the way, I was compelled to give up. I couldn't do that now. On the last world! Besides, after taunting me with memories of Melissa, I felt the game had to give me some answers. I noticed that the first world, or the first level, was a red temple. So at least I'd be familiar with the level's graphics, if nothing else. And I went in with Godzilla. The monster I was most familiar with. Godzilla had been shrunk. The level and score meters were vanished, and the blue temple faces were back. The music was similar to the blue temple also. Strange, haunting vocalizations. I tried to get my spirits up by thinking, well, if this level is just like the blue temple, that must mean there's no enemies to deal with, right? How wrong I was. After a short walk, the statue's eyes started glowing, and a pack of the beasts from the Shadow Labyrinth came charging into me. Since they were coming from the right of the screen, I had to fight my way through them. The battle greatly tested my reflexes, but thanks to my speed, I plowed through the beasts. They gave off health power-ups after dying, which helped recover the damage they had given me. However, as I continued through the hallway, the statue's eyes glowed again, summoning another wave. It seemed to be the same number of them, but I was less prepared this time, and I took more damage. I had gone through 4 of these waves until I reached the end of the hall, where I heat beamed the last of the monsters over the edge into an abyss. At first it seemed that I'd reached a dead end, but after the statue's eyes stopped glowing, a brick path slowly appeared before me. I followed the path, which kept me moving towards the right until it stopped at a wall, where I was to go vertically by jumping up ledges. Along the way, I encountered some new creatures and some kind of strange shrine, which had a statue of the Hell Beast and some other creature I didn't recognize. As I went through, the path took a downward direction, so I had to carefully aim my jumps to avoid the enemies, which were plentiful in this part of the stage. It didn't have many attacks, but they could easily shove you over the edge of a platform. At the end of this tunnel, there were a few small platforms floating above nothingness. I landed on one towards the left of the screen, and then something came down from above. It looked just like the Blue Angel from the graveyard, except it was red and had a skull face. Any of the pleasant feelings I had from the Blue Angel weren't present with this. As it hovered around, its eye sockets started glowing just like the statues, and and summon monsters to attacking me. Surely this wasn't the same benevolent being I had encountered before. This must be some kind of imposter. The battle was nerve-wracking, as I started off with nearly half my health, and had to deal with multiple opponents, as well as the threat of gravity. To make things even worse, as the Red Angel took damage, some of the panels fell, until only 3 remained. But my luck hadn't run out yet. Just when I thought it was over, I struck the Blue Angel one last time, and it turned out that one last hit was all it could take. Just as the Red Angel completely disintegrated, the game instantly went back to the Zenith board. I moved Mothra over to the nearest stage from the Red Temple, which seemed to be a garbled mess of letters spelling kill, and I started playing. As suspected, all the level graphics were made up of jumbled letters, and Mothra, just like Godzilla, was shrunk down to half size. I began to suspect that all Zenith levels would be like this. The background music was terrible, as if someone put all the sounds an NES was able to make, put them into a blender, and then pieced them back together into a song. I had to turn the volume down because of it. Playing as Mothra made avoiding enemies easier, but they were nonetheless determined to get at me. The first enemies I saw were headless Gigants, and later on there were hybrid monsters pieced together from previous bosses, like the Biollante-headed thing seen above. 5 minutes had passed, as I didn't see anything new. The level shifted into another segment. The music changed from the loud and annoying beeps to something far more ambient and menacing. The level graphics also changed, now looking a blood-drenched junkyard. The way everything in this level was red made it sickening to look at. The enemies multiplied in number, never ceasing to follow after me, and became harder and harder to avoid. At the end of the level, the situation reached a climax, as the swarms of monsters fused together into one terrifying, enormous hybrid. Once I had gotten through the initial shock, I discovered the only way to destroy this thing was to just shoot I-beams at the Hedorah cluster that formed its heads. If you attacked anywhere else, it would regenerate the damage. Even with that knowledge, this was an extremely difficult fight. I'd say it was as hard as fighting the Moon Beast, if not harder. His most common attack was lunging forward with his arms, covered with Gigan saws and blades. If they touched, it would instantly drain health. When it was over, the remaining monsters collapsed into a heap, and they, along with the ground below, started to disintegrate and sink towards the bottom of the screen. When I came back to the board, I thought to myself, so far the game has been putting the easiest levels first. If that's the case, how bad will the rest of Zenith be? With 2 levels down and 3 to go, my monsters and I had taken our foothold in the world of nightmares that was Zenith. Deciding what action to take next was more tense and more difficult than ever before. But ultimately, I had no way of knowing what the next levels would be like, or how well my monsters would be prepared for them. So my only option was to guess. I tried to interpret what the icons of the next levels ahead of me were. The last level before the boss fights was obviously representing some kind of volcanic area with lava and open flames. The middle icon I still didn't get, except that looked fleshy and vaguely like an organ of some kind. Oddly oversized as well. The one I was nearest to and about to enter next looked like thorny vines covering a puddle of blood. I guess this would be a level with blood rivers, like the chase level of Dementia. As such, I went with Anguirus because due to its rolling move, it would have the fastest moving speed while submerged. The level which I call Blood Lake, it looked exactly like I expected. Rivers of blood accompanied by thorn-covered vines, which were scattered along the sides of the ground. The level was rather faint, but I could hear a distinct drum beat and a few other instruments. A lot of echoes, and sometimes it sounded like someone was hitting a drum underwater. I was disappointed to see that Anguirus was shrunk just as Godzilla and Mothra had been. Apparently all of the Zenith levels would be like this. I felt less secure with my giant monsters not being so giant. I walked along without interruption for only a minute until my path was reaching a dead end. There was a massive gap between the ground I was walking on and the ground to the right of the screen. I would have swam across and continued to the right, but due to the huge mass of brambles in the way, there was nowhere to go. Two creatures with gliding membranes on their arms and lamprey-like mouths were perched on outstretched vines and screeching at me, much like a crow does to an invader of its territory. Another unnerving display of possible sentience by the creatures of this game, if it's even accurate to refer to them as being of the game, but I digress. I descended into the blood, slowly sinking to the floor. Aquatic enemies were everywhere, and they were hard to avoid. The black shark in particular was very aggressive and hard to deal with, but thankfully I only encountered one. As the scene became more and more crowded, I swam to the top to find that it was littered with floating corpses. Creepy, but at least they're not a threat. Or so I thought. Until they all sprang up to life and started leaping on me. They were trying to pull me under, and they were draining my health as they did it. They all attacked as a group, and when I got one off me, another would jump on me from behind. I had to curl up into a ball and roll for them to loosen the grip. And when they did, I quickly retreated. It wasn't long before I had reached another land path. A note regarding the brambles, you can stand on them, but it causes pain. You can also destroy some of the vines, but only the thinner ones. I had to destroy multiple vines as well as dealing with more enemies. I was interrupted by a scream. Mother. The scream was only up for about 30 seconds. Then it went back to the level. I was facing another dead end. A pregnant humanoid creature being hanging from the top right of the screen by a spine umbilical cord. Instantly, the creature's belly was split open from the inside. As the lower part of the body was ripped apart and fell into the river below, the Blood Lake's boss was revealed. It came flying at me, making a shrill hacking scream. I was forced to move back. The bat was a highly mobile boss, and difficult to hit. As I moved back along the ground, the monster opened its mouth and shot out a barrage of needles. I jumped over them and managed to give it a blow to the head, and it started flying out of my reach. As the bat was flying, it shot a stream of fire from its eye sockets and started trying to hit me with its flames. I rode along the ground, which drained my power but put us at equal speed. The cycle repeated about 3 times until the monster was defeated. With most of my health drained, I went back to the edge of the level, and the large bramble vine blocking the exit was now gone. And only 2 levels left to go. Who to send this time? Godzilla, Mothra, and Anguirus had all completed 1 level, leaving Solomon. Also the mysterious 5th monster. I tried to access it again, but with no luck. I chose to use Godzilla again for the next level, and Solomon for the final one. The second to last level was what I would refer to as the organic level, which was the most visually unpleasant of all of them. Right from the start, I could tell that the graphics were freakishly different. The atmosphere was gruesome and foreboding, with the addition of the loud, droning music. I was dreading what I would see in these levels. It was only a few seconds before something appeared. 2 hideous things. It was hard to describe most of this level. Everything had this disturbing, semi-real look to it. Most of the enemies look halfway between real animals and misshapen lumps of gore with teeth. It is also worth noting that all of them were considerably larger than Godzilla, and although the majority were not very intelligent, each one of them took around 30 hits to kill. Due to this, it was a much better idea to run away from them rather than fight, but it was never clear exactly what direction to run. While most levels involved going to the right to get to the exit, the path of this level was primarily going down, by walking to the edge of one platform and jumping to a lower one. There was no way to make sure you were going the right way, and apparently no means of getting back up to the higher platforms if necessary. Also, certain enemies acted like they were aware that you had to jump down, and would stand at the edge of the platform, waiting for you. When this happened, I would have to walk back and wait until the monster would leave. As I went on, I came across platforms stacked upon each other with little space between them, looking like a maze. This meant I couldn't jump, and it made escape from enemies difficult. Luckily, the only enemies able to fit through here were the 4-legged beasts seen at the beginning of the level. In addition, adding to the difficulty were long tapeworm-esque monsters that would rise themselves up between the platforms and attack you, or trap you. The only attack they responded to was the heat beam, which would cause them to shrink back down. This was costing even more power. I couldn't afford to do it without the heat beam for long. While trying to avoid the abominations that dwell in this level, I found that if you stand idle in one place for too long, the level tries to absorb your monster. I think it was about 4 minutes before the end of this level that made me physically sick. The tension was getting to me, and having to take in all these disgusting sights made me physically sick. No. Sorry. Made me want to puke. nearly did pause the game and look for a bag, but I was able to hold it together. I also found a trick at the end of the level, but it was too late to do me any real good. If two different species of monster run into each other face to face, they would attack each other and leave me alone. I didn't intentionally cause this, it just happened. Finally at the end, it was time for another boss fight. It was certainly ugly, but not quite as horrific as I feared. But more important than dealing with its appearance was defeating it. And since I had my health bar to start off with, there was no room for errors. It was attached to the floor when I first saw it, but after 10 hits, it detached from the floor and began floating. It moved fast, but unlike the Blood Lake's boss, he wasn't impeded by any sort of gravity. He is even able to fly through the ground without any collision effect. It used this to its advantage and would float beneath the ground and spring up randomly to bite you. But it stopped doing this after a few well-aimed kicks to the face. The pink area on its upper jaw was a weak point, too. Too many hits there would cause it to spasm uncontrollably. The new strategy was to rapidly float up while moving back and forth through the stage, trying to constantly keep its jaws aimed up towards me. Health was getting critical at this point, and I spammed the heat beam from which it had no defense. In the last stretch of the battle, the monster had lost its mind, rapidly rushing back and forth and gnashing its jaws. I had to duck under it and then strike when its back was turned. 20 more hits, and it was destroyed. One last level to go. And it was down to the last level. I didn't hesitate. I selected Solomon and entered. Perhaps a little too fast. The last level was definitely the peak of disconnect between what the NES was graphically capable of and what this game would create. The music also caught my attention. It was one of the only songs that appeared more than once. The horrible screeching from when the Hell Beast appeared in the game, in the graveyard. As soon as I started, there was already an enemy prepared to attack. A centaur holding a whip, and it wasn't alone. As soon as I started, and when I started fighting, several more centaurs appeared, coming from both sides of the screen at the same time. It was too much to handle. Solomon's flight saved me from taking too much damage at the beginning of the level. The centaurs followed after, but seemed to be unable to jump. After escaping the centaurs, I noticed gaps in the floor, or gaps in the ground. While trying to avoid the jumping sword mouth enemies in mid-flight, I got close to the surface of the lava, and a creature emerged and tried to grab me. It didn't succeed, but I was startled. Careful and maneuvering would be needed to avoid instant death here. As new enemies appeared, the level soon became very difficult. A lot of the trouble came from the stocky red demons that stood on top of tall, narrow mountains that spewed fire. I got by them by waiting until their back was turned and hitting them with a flying kick, which made them fall into the lava. It was at this time that I realized that I wasn't gaining any health from killing enemies. Not all the ground was stable. At one point, the ground was reduced to small chunks that slowly drifted to the right. Some of them would sink into the lava upon landing on them. And there was no way to tell which ones would sink and which ones wouldn't. Being so close to the lava added the threat of the lava creatures. This was very frustrating. I was also feeling very hot, which made concentrating hard. If you've ever had a heat rash, it felt similar to that. I periodically stopped for water because of it. This was almost certainly due to the game, not my imagination. But I kept pushing the thought out of my head. I didn't want to think about it. At the end of the stage, I encountered the boss rising from the lava. His arrival noted with an ungodly howling roar. When it walked onto the land, I saw how gigantic it was. Several times the size of Solomon. I was about to fly up and attack it when it opened its mouth and let out a huge blast of fire. I had to fly to dodge the flames, then get close enough to the boss to fire a heat beam at its face, causing it to stumble backward. If it didn't stumble backwards, it would have kept moving left until it forced Solomon into the lava, as there was no more ground within reach. The beast had to wait between uses of its fire breath, as it seemed to cost a great deal of energy. I used this time to attack it, but fire wasn't its only weapon, and I had to be wary of the monster swatting at me with its clawed hands. As its health decreased, it moved faster, and the battle felt like a tug of war between the two monsters over this bridge of land. After about 40 hits, it was defeated, tumbling backwards into the lava from whence it came. And then, the final stage had been completed. At last, it was down to 2 bosses, a final encounter with a Hell Beast. For some reason, I thought Ghidorah would be easier to fight, so I confronted him first. The classic Ghidorah music played, or started, from the original. Okay, let me reword that. I'm out of character for a second. Right, back in character. The classic Ghidorah music from the original game started up as I was faced against the new King Ghidorah. King Ghidorah was as powerful and unrelenting as ever. He instantly lashed out with gravity beams, which were more damaging than Godzilla's heat beam. It became a struggle of constantly beating Ghidorah at every opportunity to keep him from using the attack. But Ghidorah soon saw through my tactic and began using physical attacks as well. He would strike with each of his necks, knocking me backward and making it impossible to get close enough to punch him. But I had an idea. To wait for him to lunge with one of his heads and immediately blast it with a heat beam. It worked, and to my surprise, the heat beam had actually obliterated Ghidorah's middle head. But it was only a few seconds before I realized what this would lead to. And sure enough, King Ghidorah was using the power of the glitch to turn into Mecha King Ghidorah. But what really shocked me was the sudden change in music. I'd heard it before, but it wasn't from the original NES game. It was from the game Super Godzilla during the Mecha King Ghidorah fight. Mecha King Ghidorah's first attack was definitely its most deadly, the Machine Hand. Very similar to Gigan's Saw, it immobilizes the monster and rapidly drains the health bar. Fortunately, before Ghidorah could do a lot of damage, the timer ran out. I would need to defeat Mecha King Ghidorah quickly to prevent him from using the Machine Hand, so I sent Solomon to fight him. The two monsters were evenly matched in strength, but Solomon was faster, and by slashing and heat beaming without pause, the cyborg monster soon met its end. With Ghidorah defeated, I was returned to the board. I now outnumbered the enemy by 4 monsters to 1, and victory seemed to be close at hand. The base icon had changed to a blood red color. I could feel hatred emanating from it. I started the fight against Destroya with Anguirus, and the music was the same as Ghidorah's. When the fight began, Destroya was in microscopic form. After one hit, it turned into the Juvenile, which had a few attacks and was also dealt with easily. The fight became serious once Destroya entered the aggregate form, gaining the use of large arms and the micro-oxygen beam. Anguirus' roll attack, which had been very useful up until now, was rendered useless by Destroya constantly attacking me with his large arms when I tried to use it. For this part of the fight, I had to rely solely on brute strength. Just before the timer ran out, Destroya changed into his flying form, which Anguirus was ill-suited to fight against. Going back in, I fought against the flying form with Mothra, which seemed fitting. Mothra was weaker than Anguirus, but much better equipped to dodge and counter Flying Destroya's attacks, so the fight was in my favor. However, the Mecha Ghidorah fight music started playing, and Destroya changed into his final form sooner than I expected, which drastically changed the tables. Turned the tables, I'm sorry. Mothra's attacks were doing very little to Destroya, and I had to move furiously to avoid damage while waiting for time to run out. Even though it would be near impossible to defeat Destroya with Mothra, I still had 3 other monsters. Final form of Destroya was very resilient to taking damage, and the heavily armored foe would not be defeated without a long fight. In the last part of the fight, I wasn't using much strategy, just attacking as brutally and as fast as I could. The images that they were showing was just sort of a montage of the monsters that were used. On his last bar of health, Destroya tried one last counterattack, a beam of energy from its chest. I don't know how powerful it would have been, because just before it could use the attack, I punched Destroya in the chest, destroying him. And that was it. The last kaiju boss was gone. In the midst of all the excitement, I'd briefly forgotten that there was still one more thing to do before the game would be over. Seeing the level icon again hit me like a ton of bricks, and I froze over for a few seconds, or for a few minutes. I'd come so far to get to this point, but I was terrified. I really didn't want to know what this last encounter would be like. Before I could let myself think about it any longer, I moved Godzilla over and began the stage. You're here now. This is the end. Just one last thing, and it's all over. When the screen changed, there was nothing. Just Godzilla and a black screen. I walked back and forth, fired a heat beam, nothing, until I heard something. The faint sound of a familiar drum beat. This is it. The epilogue. Or the final part. Chapter 8. Finale. Oh, dear God. That was my first thought on realizing I would have to fight Red, the creature that had tormented me through the entire game. How was I able to fight something that could kill in one touch? It seemed totally impossible. Thankfully, Red was no longer able to deliver one-hit kills, but despite that, this was still the most difficult boss I had ever faced, in this game or otherwise. If I had any real comprehension of what I was getting into before, I would have never done it. Before I started the fight, I'm sorry. I very soon learned what a horrible mistake I had made. Red reached out and clawed at Godzilla. And when those claws cut through him, I felt it. I know it's common knowledge for people to cringe up when their video game character gets hurt or loses a life, but this wasn't that at all. This was genuine physical pain. When the pain struck me, I paused the game. I hadn't suffered any actual injuries, but it felt just like my shoulder had been clawed through. I had seen and experienced many unpleasant things at this point, but the game causing real pain to me was where I drew the line. Yes, I'd be disappointed that I wouldn't get to see the ending, but the risk was no longer worth it. I was about to get up to take one last screenshot and turn off the NES when I realized something else. I couldn't get up. I was paralyzed in my seat. The only muscles that I could move were my fingers and thumbs. As the terror set in, a new message appeared on the screen. You are not leaving. I started to scream, but only a weak choking sound was coming out. I desperately tried to get my body to move, but nothing did it. It did nothing. I was looking every direction, and then I looked over at the computer. Somehow the computer was taking screenshots of the game on its own when I began the fight. I still don't know how or why. Something in the game must have caused it. Since Red could hear what I was saying, I tried begging for him to let me go. From here things started to get hazy, as I was under extreme stress, but from what I could remember I said, I'm sorry I insulted you. I didn't mean it. I didn't know things would get this serious. Just please let me go. If you let me go, I promise I won't tell anyone to turn the game on or anything ever again. Please! And Red replied, You pathetic worm. It's too late now. Only one will survive. Only one will survive? Oh, hi. Sorry I didn't see your comments earlier, Paul Boy. Alright. Only one will survive? The statement couldn't be any more clear. And if I didn't kill Red, then he would kill me. Like an idiot, I played around with something I didn't understand. Now I think it might cost me my life. I stopped struggling to move and accepted the reality of the situation. There was only one way to get out of this alive. I had to kill Red. It all went by so fast. If it weren't for the screenshots, I might never have remembered any of this. Just like in the chase levels, Red moved at a horrifyingly fast speed. There was barely any time to process a thought. Thus, there was no time to form a strategy. I had to rely solely on my wits and reflexes. To make things even worse, There was no way to predict what kind of attacks Red might use, so I had to be on the offensive and defensive. I felt every hit that Godzilla took. They all hurt. I tried so hard to avoid the damage, but every attack that I had dodged left me vulnerable to another, and the pain only got worse. After he jumped over me, Red's eyes started to glow. I moved far back, as far as I could, and ducked. But there was no dodging this one. Oh my god. What? When this hit me, I really did scream. I screamed so loud that someone else in the apartment should have heard me. But they didn't. Just looking at the image hurts me, making me remember the incinerating burn. I paused the game because it hurt so bad, but Red unpaused the game to attack me again, which made me furious. I immediately counterattacked with a heat beam again and again until the power meter was completely diminished. I wanted Red to hurt like I did. Just before the timer ran out, Red turned into his swimming form. I didn't think the timer would be affecting its battle like this, but I'm thankful for it, because it gave me a few minutes to collect my thoughts and decide again on what to do next. I chose to fight Red's next two forms with the monsters I encountered them with, so Anguirus was next. It probably wasn't all that smart of an idea, but that's what I did. I jumped up and heat beamed Red in the face, and he moved off screen where I couldn't reach him. Then a wave of large mines started to fall from above. I felt this was unfair, so I shouted, "If you're going to cheat, then why did you even let me use the controller?"
Can't break the rules.
And then he came at me, rushing from the top left, downwards. Damn it! I wouldn't be able to see where his next attack would be coming from. Red continued to strike from random angles. I continually moved to swerve around him. Another 40 seconds went by, and Anguirus was nearly gone. But together we had forced Red into his flying form. So it was Mothra's turn next. Deciding to fight Red with Mothra was a terrible idea. Mothra was instantly overwhelmed, and the life meter was devastated in a mere 15 seconds. And once Mothra's life had gone down to 2 bars, Red did something I didn't see coming. He reached out, grabbed Mothra, and ate her. After Mothra was devoured, I felt an agonizing pain, like being crushed to death. Mothra had been killed for my stupidity, and I would share the pain. It was a short transition from the battle to the board, but it felt like an hour. Pain combined with being unable to move was driving me insane. I badly wanted this to end. I never wanted anything so much. But I still had hope. There was one monster left that could be brought to full health by engaging Red in battle. Solomon. If any of them had a chance to save my life now, it would be him. Solomon apparently had some history with Red, as when the fight began, this dialogue appeared.
Traitor, I always hated you. You can die like the rest. I'd rather die than serve you.
Red took me by surprise by immediately burning me with his demonic fire a second time. As much as it hurt, it actually worked to my advantage, since Solomon started at full health. He still had some to spare, but now Red had used up all his energy and couldn't use his ultimate weapon any longer. Now he would die. As he drew close to the end of his life bar, Red turned his whole body to face the screen and flew upwards, then slammed down in an attempt to crush Solomon. When that failed to work, he tried to devour Solomon like he had Mothra, but he wouldn't be eating my monster this time. I thought I had won, but something was wrong. Red wasn't sinking to the screen, and I still couldn't move. Red was still alive.
I'm not done with you.
Part 2, everyone. I mean, of the finale, not streams. After his seeming defeat by Solomon, Red had reconstructed his body into a gigantic final form, transporting us into a blazing inferno in the process. It was reminiscent of our first encounter, except now the scenery, much like the true power of Red, had become very real. The music had erupted into a loud blaring sound, a furious drum of death. Faced against Red's insane amount of health, my own demise was imminent. Solomon was my strongest monster, but not even he stood a chance. It was like trying to fight a mountain. Within seconds, Solomon was overpowered and dropped to the floor. When Red crushed him to death beneath his foot. Sorry. When Red crushed him to death underneath his foot, the sadistic demon took his time as he snapped Solomon's vertebrae and ribs like dry, brittle twigs. I could tell he was enjoying our pain.
You are weak. Your monsters are weak. You will all die.
This is hopeless. I'm a dead man. I had no choice but to send another monster to his death. We're all going to die. I only hoped they would forgive me. After decreasing Red's health by a minuscule amount, Anguirus was also obliterated. Red had unleashed a hail of blazing hot needles into his face until he collapsed. Another moment of unspeakable agony. Then nothingness as my ally faded away.
You can't win, Zachary.
I asked Red how he knew my name, and then he said it.
I've known you for a long time. I'll tell you a secret. I killed Melissa.
For years she was being tormented by something nobody understood. And now I knew what it was. Now I understood why I was mocked about Melissa's death, and how the game knew about it. Because he knew about it. Because he was the one responsible. And this time, he was going to kill me.
Sing your last monster. I will end this futile struggle.
I was taken back to the board to send Godzilla to his final stand. Barely anything was left of the board, just Godzilla and Red's icon and the fifth monster! In the midst of everything that was happening, I had completely forgotten about it. I tried yet again to select it. I cursed, I begged, I screamed at it to do something, anything to help me. To no avail. There was only one thing to do. I knew Godzilla didn't stand more of a chance than the rest did, but maybe, just maybe, now that all the other monsters were gone, the fifth monster might awaken. I managed to get the creature's icon selected. I pressed A as fast as I could. The icon started to shake as if it was desperately trying to move. It was then that Red decided he was done playing fair, and before I could activate the monster, he went for the killing blow, paralyzing my heart. My hands started to become numb and unfeeling, but even as my vision was fading away, I still tried to press the A button. Red surely was breaking one of his rules, but he must have thought that if he was going to kill me quickly, then it would be too late for any consequences to matter. He would have won. He was wrong. Red's power was being challenged by another force. It prevented him from killing me. When I regained my vision, I saw a familiar sight.
Zack, you don't have much time left.
Who are you?
You already know me. I am Melissa.
What? How is that possible? Red told me that he killed you.
It's true. Even after death, he tortures me. If you can't stop him, he'll do the same to you.
But how will I be able to stop him now?
I can't fight Red, but there is one who can. I will release him from Red's grasp. Don't give up. I love you.
Her words stirred something inside me. I wasn't going to die like this, and I had more to fight her for than my own life. I had to fight to save Melissa and the world she inhabits. With her help, the fifth monster was finally unleashed. Acacius, the Golden Light. It was time to end this once and for all. Together, we would take this damned hellspawn out of existence.
They can't save you.
Acacius was by far the strongest playable monster in the game. He had to be if we had any chance of surviving. His punch involved turning his hands into blades, which caused tremendous damage. But Red had more than enough life to spare. In the end, this would come down to pure skill. With one final strike, Red was defeated. His body disintegrated and sank below, accompanied by a soar of triumphant music. Slowly, the paralysis wore off, and I was able to stand up again. Take that, you son of a bitch. Against all odds, I finally defeated you. But at what cost? Godzilla, Anguirus, Mothra, Solomon? I nearly lost you, Acacius. We had done it. Melissa's death had been avenged, and I felt overwhelming happiness. Until I remembered all the death and pain that led up to this point. all the other monsters who had fought and died. I was about to mourn for them, but the game had yet to conclude. Tears of joy streamed down my face, and I broke down crying. I cried harder than I had in several years, maybe in my whole life. All I had been through, all I had discovered, and now the game was coming to an end. But before she and the others left, Melissa had something to tell me.
You have saved us. We are forever grateful. We'll be together again, someday.
I am Zachary, and at the time I write this, it has been 3 weeks since that fateful night when I played the NES Godzilla game. Going back to that night, to immediately after I turned off the NES, once I was able to start walking around again, the first thing I did was unplug the NES, take out the cartridge, and put them in separate sock drawers. I looked over at the computer. All the screenshots you've seen in this story were saved. I backed up all the images on a flash drive before I turned off the computer, just in case. After that, I hit the bed and instantly passed out. It wasn't a restful sleep, but one out of pure exhaustion. Felt like no time had passed before I woke up again. What a day it was. The first thought I recall coming to mind was, what the hell happened last night? I thought about it for a short while, until it occurred to me to contact the person I got the game from to begin with, Billy. So I called him up and told him to just come over to my apartment, which he did. And I showed him the screenshots and gave him a very basic summary of what had happened. At first, he thought I was pulling a joke on him, but he soon realized that that wasn't the case. Once it had hit him that this was real, he was speechless. He made it clear that he had absolutely not tampered with the game, and had no idea about any of this. So then the obvious question to ask Billy was, where did you get it from? I got the simple answer of another friend of mine that I trade games with. He assured me that this was a trustworthy person. I never had any trust issues with games that I got from him before. Or he never had any. So then Billy called him, but when we told this guy the story, he was as shocked and surprised as anyone, except he abruptly hung up on us. This clearly wasn't going anywhere. Before Billy left that day, he asked me if I wanted him to take the cartridge and dispose of it. I sharply declined. He asked how I could possibly still want to keep the thing. I told him that I needed time to think it over. And that was that. Billy and I haven't talked much since, even though I told him that this wasn't the case. I can get the impression that Billy thinks what happened with the game was his fault. After he left that day, I did a lot of thinking. It was very hard for me to do anything else, really. I couldn't stop thinking about the game. There were so many questions left unanswered. What was Red? Was Melissa really in the game? How did she get there? Why did all of this happen with this game? But the one question that kept me up for many nights was, Red said that he had known me for a long time. How? Ever since then, I couldn't shake this feeling of being watched. The game made me ask myself questions about death and reality in ways that I never wanted to think about. I'm not too sure of anything anymore. constantly thinking about it soon began to have a negative effect on my life. I just didn't care about anything else at this point. By comparison, all the other day-to-day activities seemed utterly pointless. I eventually decided that I had chosen between one of two things: to play the game or destroy it. I tried several times to convince me to try the former, but I never got farther than plugging the NES back up. Just touching the cartridge made me remember all the pain I had felt during the fight with Red. I wondered if playing the game again might cause something terrible to happen. I didn't know anything about how this game worked, and it was too risky. I wasn't sure I could stand another round of the game anyway. So then it was time for the other option. Wanting to get some fresh air, I took the game with me and drove to the lake, planning to throw it in. Got to the lake with the cartridge in my hand. I looked down on it and I thought of Melissa. If what I had experienced with the game was indeed genuine, doing what I did might have been the only way to save her from endless torture. In a way, this warped game might have saved her life. Damn it. Once that thought came into my head, I knew then I wasn't able to destroy it. So I just sat down at a bench, gazing at the lake for about an hour. Ultimately, I decided on a third option: selling the game on eBay. It may be selfish, but I promise you that it has nothing to do with money. I don't care how much or how little I get paid for this game. Believe me. It's selfish because I don't want the opportunity of owning this cartridge anymore. I cannot dwell on this forever, and the only way I can deal with this is by putting the game out of my life. So this brings me to the main reasons I created a summary of these events. First is to record the details while I can remember them. And second is that whoever bids on this game knows what they're getting themselves into. I can't guarantee the safety of anyone who plays this game, or that anything will happen at all, but to the new owner of the game, remember this: be careful. And if you feel as if the game is literally messing with your mind, shut the damn thing off. And that was it. That was the entirety of the NES Godzilla Creepypasta, revised by yours truly. I just wanted to say this story still rings true as possibly the greatest creepypasta of all time. I know that might be a bit of a stretch and there might be better ones out there, but to me this is my favorite. Forget everything you know about creepypasta, you know, the whole Jep the Killer, the whole Slender Man, the whole Sonic.exe, everything like that. That pales in comparison to this creepypasta. Everything about it just, it's so amazing. The way the story was presented, how even though there was like a cliche or two, which was, I got the game from someone else, and the whole dead person being a major part, it never made it seem like a huge cliche. It just made it seem like the game is possessed by a malevolent force, which is later revealed to be the main antagonist. And the main protagonist had a girlfriend who was very dear to them, and she died after getting hit by a truck. And that thing that killed her turned out to be Red, because he influenced her to do that. Like, the way the story is highly detailed, including with the screenshots. Keep in mind, those aren't real screenshots, but the way they're made and portrayed, and how they're made to look like real, genuine screenshots, props to Cosby Daff. you are an amazing pixel artist. I appreciate the artwork that you've done, not only for this creepypasta, but for the games that you're making. Yeah, like I've said in the past, Cosby Daff and a guy known as Luri Nelly, I think, or Luri Neri, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I forgot. They are making a recreation of the story into an actual game. So when I said that it was getting a fan-made recreation, it's not fan-made. It's official. Everything in the story, and even some new things, are going to be added. I think they're working on Mars right now, and they added a level type called Void. And not only that, but there is actually a sequel that is currently in production by Cosby Daff called NES Godzilla Replay, which revolves around a new character, Carl, who now owns the cartridge. As said, this is a direct sequel to the NES Godzilla Creepypasta, as it follows a new main character and a new antagonist by the name of Warlock. And, like, the whole game is different, but it still has a sort of malevolent tone to it. So it's still paranormal. But, with that being said, I just wanted to say thank you to the people who have been around to see these streams. I know you guys aren't able to see everything that happens in the story like you saw in the first, narration of the story. And I know I kind of stumbled a whole lot during the story, but listen, I'm not very good at narrating, I'm not very good at it. This is sort of like practice for me, I guess. But I digress. All I have to say is this is definitely a top-notch story. For those who are interested in creepypastas and have never heard of this story before, definitely give it a read. Just look up NES Godzilla Creepypasta on whatever search engine that you use primarily, and go at it. It's a great story. It's extremely well done, and I'd highly recommend it to anybody who likes video game creepypastas. Except Sonic.exe, because that's chock full of cliches that we shall not talk about. But anyway, with that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you did, then please like, comment, and subscribe, as well as turn on notifications and let your friends know all about this channel, so that way they can check it out. And just as a reminder, I currently have a sub goal of 1,000. I know in the past I've said I don't have sub goals, but now I do, because at some point I want to be monetized, so that way I can make money that I could put towards maybe getting new equipment so I can work on new projects, or new upgrades for the gaming computer that I'm saving up for, or new games that I hope to cover in the future. Stuff like that, So, and whenever I get to driving a car, like if I ever get a car, gas money, of course. Anyway, with that being said, thank you all very much for sticking around and watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this revised narration of the NES Godzilla Creepypasta. Like I said, check out the story, check out the game that is being made by Cosby Daff and Luri. There's actually a demo of the game that has been actively updated as often as they can. Actually, I think a couple weeks ago is whenever they released the newest version of the demo, which has a new world to go to, which is Mars, I think. Yeah, Mars. Voice crack. But, yeah, if you ever check that out, then you'll see just how much work they put into this, because Cosby Daff, he's actually on DeviantArt. Now you're probably thinking, DeviantArt, where all those fetish artists are? Listen, he's not a fetish artist. He is a fantastic artist at what he makes. He has made sprite sheets and even animations of what the creatures do, like the monsters, the bosses, stuff like that. And the animations that you saw that you will see in the actual story, like the eagle head moving around and the faucet and the bear kid licking a lollipop, those were all made by him. So huge props to Cosby Dad for making such a well done story complete with details like that. It's really great to see that kind of stuff in a creepypasta, or just any story in general that's meant to be scary. But with that being said, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you guys ever have any copies of the NES Godzilla game just lying around, don't worry, they're not actually malevolent, but if they are, turn the game off.